Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Marcia Klingensmith from FinTech Consulting. Welcome, Marcia. How are you?
I'm doing great, Donna. So glad to be on your podcast. I was looking at your inventory. You've had like all the big name speakers on your podcast. I'm honored to be, part of the crew now.
Well, we are so glad that you could join us, and now we get to add your name to the ranks. Well, to get us started, Marcia, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, your background in the payments industry, and then also what you do at FinTech Consulting?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of FinTech Consulting. So I work
FinTech Consulting. Sorry.
in the payment space. So I work with small and mid-sized financial institutions that are looking help for their to have help on their business strategy around instant payments. And so my goal is to keep the process as simple as possible for them, right? They have enough going on in their lives. They just need somebody who can kind of cut to the chase and help them understand, how this is relevant to them. So I do things like boot camp strategy workshops so that they can understand how this aligns to the needs of their customers and how they, as a financial institution, can benefit. I help them understand how this aligns to the technology projects that they have in flight so that they can build a clear roadmap for success. I do like 101 training so that the organization can have a sense of the value and it makes the change a little bit easier. I also provide product and market enablement to help drive adoption, and just additional support is needed to help give them the confidence to drive that success. And, as for my background, I have more than 15 years in financial services, leading teams, taking products and solutions from idea to delivery. And I also have an additional 5 years in fraud and identity. And I worked at organizations such as Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Visa, LexisNexis Risk. And most recently, I was leading teams to build out real-time capabilities from requirements through certification with the clearinghouse at FIS. So I took a couple of banks from idea through pilot and production, and I also took the technology, through the whole life cycle. So I'm intimate with both kind of like the business and the technology aspects of instant payments. And so combine that with my broad and deep experience in the industry, I'm really able to help the stakeholders get through this phase with ease.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you are a jack of all trades, or maybe a Jill of all trades in this case.
Yeah, Chain of Ultra. Yeah, that's what I always think. Yeah, it's awesome. I love this space. It's so cool.
It is, and it's just so dynamic, especially now, right? So much is changing, so it keeps it interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so my first question for you, and it's really the question I start off when I interview all my guests. What would you say is the most notable trend in the payments industry today?
Yeah. So because it's so instant payments is really quickly accelerating on adoption, and I feel like it's soon going to reach ubiquity across the globe. We have like 72% of the world's infrastructure already supports instant payments, and many countries are even now working to solve that cross-border problem. So in fact, we see poster child examples like UPI in India, and where there's been more than 9 billion transactions a month. We have PIX, which is the instant payment method in Brazil. And this year, they've only been in the market 2 years, and this year they've already surpassed credit card. PIX transactions have surpassed credit card and debit card transactions. And so I think the launch of FedNow is really going to help accelerate the adoption of instant payments in the U.S., not only for the FedNow network, but also, for the clearinghouse network. And then as the government starts issuing more payments through the networks, I think financial institutions are really going to want to onboard to the network so that they can accept those payments on behalf of their customers. And then I think the use of QR codes, which is really popular in those other countries where instant payments is actively used, QR codes is also going to help with the adoption of instant payments, so that I think we're likely to be seeing QR codes being introduced as a way to facilitate instant payments in the US. and particularly as we start getting into point of sale transactions.
I think that's great. I don't know why this came to mind, but I heard an expression recently that a rising tide floats all boats, right? So as this tide of real-time payments rises, all of those things are just going to become more prevalent, right? They're all going to increase in adoption. So
Yeah, at the Faster Payments Council, I heard Mark Majeski give some of the stats that they were seeing in Alacrity, and he was saying that the trend is when banks are onboarding, they not only onboard for the FedNow network, but they are also joining up for the clearinghouse network, which is good because they're not interoperable and there's already more than $34 billion of transactions going through the clearinghouse network. So if banks want to really be servicing their customers, they want to make sure they're able to catch all of those transactions and provide a consistent user experience, because you're only there for half the payments, your user experience isn't going to be the best.
that's true. That's very true. Okay, so on to the next question. What would you say is the top opportunity in the industry today for organizations that process payments?
Yeah, so I think that instant payments really needs to be thought about from an ecosystem level, right? Foundationally, we need banks to be able to send and receive. But in order to really add value to the network, we need not only the banks to be able to accept those, but we need other systems to be able to process instant payments. So, one common example is like payroll. Payroll should be a top priority um, for organizations. According to the Federal Reserve study on economic well-being, 37% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And so instant payments for payroll really helps these Americans with their financial situation, right? So they can see, where am I at? I have a rent payment or utility payment coming due. How much money do I need? Like, is my rent going to cover it? I mean, is my paycheck going to cover it? Or do I need to take that gig job to fill the gap? And as you may or may not know, a lot of gig jobs are paid out in instant payments. So by putting payroll in instant payments, it really helps those who are kind of living marginally manage their finances in a way so that they don't have to get hit with those overdraft fees or other bank fines, which is, a penalty on a penalty. Oh, and another example that I've talked about is, or that I'm thinking about is like, banks, financial institutions don't really think they have a payment problem because they've been addressing people's payment needs forever. Like, banks are more focused on lending, right? Lending's what's important to them, and that's where they make money. However, like, they don't really have control over their lending systems, right? So I talked to one bank and they were just like, oh, well, we'll get instant payments whenever our lending system updates their payment structure. So these lending platforms also need to be on top of the game, on top of their game here, and they need to be making sure that instant payments is also included in, the lending experience. So like when you issue a loan, get that direct payment, you don't have those questions like, when am I going to get my money? Or if they have an urgent need around that loan and being able to use that money for something else, those payouts will be helpful. And then when you think about closing out a loan, there's always this back and forth about like, how much money do I have to close out this loan? And there's always a little bit left over. And so, you have to track these like little piddly things. So it's a lot of manual intervention. And by integrating instant payments in the ecosystem, we can fix that. We can make it better.
That would be great. Yes, I think we've all experienced that before. So you talked about the greatest opportunity. What would you say is the biggest challenge that these organizations are facing today?
Yeah, I think like the biggest challenge that we're facing is that we have such a fractured legacy infrastructure, right? There's still a lot of legacy systems out there. And the instant payment messaging systems are pretty well defined. And there's a lot of quality providers out there that can deliver that connection to the network at a reasonable price. But I think the challenge is going to be maybe that last mile integration to the banking core, to be able to make those real-time updates and just ensure that everything's working in real time. And I think this is going to be particularly challenging for small FIs because they don't have control over the platforms, and their core platforms might not be a priority for the hosting organization. And, because it's all about, the ROI, are we going to work on the big platform that supports the big banks with lots of transactions, or are we going to work on these little, platforms that are kind of one off and scattered that take a lot of time and effort to integrate? So I think that's something we have to figure out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, this is my favorite question. Probably the most difficult to answer because there's so much happening in the payments industry today. So, how do you possibly pick just one piece of advice? But if you were to give one silver bullet piece of advice to organizations that process payments, what would that be?
Yeah, to your point, there is a lot of stuff out there. I think, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of information out there. The clearinghouse and the Fed have done a really great job of building these educational tools. But I think what happens, like if somebody hasn't been paying attention to the news all along, and then they're just tuning into that, it's probably really easy to get overwhelmed with all that information. And so I think it's really important to look to consultants, whether it's me or someone else, that can help them very quickly bring them up to speed on what's important, what they need to focus on, what the benefits are to their customers, what are the key decisions they need to work through, how it aligns with what you're already working on. In some cases, there's a lot of banks working on their digital transformation processes. And it could be, rather than starting a whole new project that costs a lot of extra money, it could be that there's like a slight tweak to something in flight that they could do to accommodate instant payments. And so if you talk to an expert, somebody who has experience with that, it can save you a lot of time and money, and it give you that sense of confidence that, hey, I got this. I know what I'm talking about. I know where this fits. And it's great when you're talking to maybe the board of directors too. So yeah, get help. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, seek wise counsel, right?
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, before I let you go, Marcia, I want to make sure that our audience knows how they can get in touch with you or learn more about FinTech Consulting. And so, where would you point them? How could they learn more?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the two things, I'm always on LinkedIn. So if you look for me, LinkedIn in Marcia K MBA. I also have a website, and it has a scheduling tool. So you can get on my calendar, and that is fintech consultant, singular, .com. So, feel free to reach out to me for, no obligation conversation. I would love to talk to you about, your needs. And
Wonderful.
thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks so much for having me here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, I just want to thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day.
Have a good one.